All right, well, welcome everybody, and thank you for attending today's presentation. As it states on this slide, this presentation is hosted by the ACRL Value of Academic Libraries Committee, and specifically the Library Impact Grants Subcommittee. We are hosting this to share findings from 3 of our 2019-20 ACRL Library Impact Grant recipients. The Library Impact Grants Subcommittee is part of the ACRL Value of Academic Libraries Committee, which is one of ACRL's goal-level committees in support of its plan for excellence. The VAL Library Impact Grants Program was developed to support academic librarians to do research that demonstrates the impact of libraries on their colleges and universities by providing scholarships and grants. The purpose of today's presentations is to provide 3 of our grant recipients with an opportunity to share their findings from their research projects that were funded through this program. This is the second series of presentations hosted to highlight this work. We held the first session on March 30th, in which 3 other grant recipients shared their work. And you can find this recording, the recording from that session, on the ACRL website under Conferences and E-Learning, and then navigate to the section Online Discussion Forums, and then follow the link to the YouTube channel. The Library Impact Grant Subcommittee members include myself, Becky Croxton. I am currently the chair of the Value of Academic Libraries Committee. Jungmi Skoulas, who's the chair of this subcommittee, Holt Zog, and Lisa Ismail, who will be working with us to moderate the Q&A today. So today we have 3 presentations. Each presenter will take about 10 minutes to share their presentation. After all 3 presentations are finished, we will then open the floor for audience Q&A. We will share the recording and a brief follow-up survey after today's session. And though we will hold questions to the presenters until the end, I do encourage you to share your questions and comments in the chat as they come to mind. So I'm honored to introduce our 3 Library Impact Grant recipients and presenters today. Amanda Mcdonald and Ann Brown from Virginia Tech University will share their presentation, How Libraries Show Impact, Creating an Adaptable Model for Tracking, Assessing, and Celebrating Student Success. Next up will be Amanda Ziegler from North Central University with her presentation, Library Impact on Online-Only Graduate Student Success. And then we'll have Ted Chodak from the College of Southern Nevada, who will present Sense of Belonging in Academic Libraries. And now I'm going to turn this over to Amanda Mcdonald to share her presentation.
All right, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and share our presentation with you today. So let's introduce ourselves just quickly. My name is Amanda Mcdonald. I'm an assistant professor and the Undergraduate Research Services librarian at Virginia Tech. And my colleague, Ann M. Brown, is also an assistant professor and a science informatics consultant with university libraries as well. So to get started, we're going to talk briefly about undergraduate research and university libraries here at Virginia Tech. So what you can see in this picture is that students are engaged in undergraduate research across the university in a variety of disciplines. It looks different, they ask different types of questions and approach inquiry in different ways. So we work with diverse students in diverse fields, doing diverse types of research. As library faculty, we're often asked to do instruction and do workshops. And so we started thinking about things like, how can we do this in a sustainable way, knowing that at the heart of research, there are a lot of concepts that can be covered that cross disciplines. So in 2014, some of my colleagues worked to develop a series called the Advanced Research Skills Series. I now coordinate this series and have done a lot of changes to it. It's now offered fully online. But this is one of those ways that we decided to help make library research training for formal undergraduate research experiences more sustainable, to having a series that we offer each spring and summer that students can enroll in. And with this co-curricular library program, we started having questions regarding motivation, participation, in addition to just thinking about, tracking and trying to identify who was doing what and where, and what students were we reaching and what students were we not reaching. So we partnered with the Office of Undergraduate Research in 2018 to create a program called the Undergraduate Research Excellence Program, or UREP for short. And the goal of this program was really to serve as an umbrella for library experiences, thinking about a way, that carrot that we could offer students at the end of library workshops or library series, to show them that this experience, this training is really valuable to you long term. And so our UREP program was one way to do that. It's a program that allows students to track their undergraduate research journey, including trainings, validate their experiences through recognition of their research efforts and achievements, and showcase their experiences for employers. So having done this through the pilot year, so the pilot year again was that 2018 year, we realized that we still had a lot of room for growth. We thought the pilot was very successful, but we still had questions on student participation and reach. And we realized in conversation with the Office of Undergraduate Research on campus that they had very similar questions as well. So this leads us to our grant proposal, and we had two original research objectives. The first research question we had was, can we create a framework for UREP that is adaptable and connected to digital and information literacy initiatives as based on the pilot? So this is an overview of the model that we developed for the Undergraduate Research Excellence Program. And as you can see, there are three stages here: explore, engage, and scholar. The explore stage is really where we see an introduction to undergraduate research, that education. So that's where students might take library workshops or maybe an intro to research class. Stage two, engage, is where students are actually conducting research. This could be the student working in a lab, maybe doing research for credit in a course. Maybe they've signed up for a summer experience. Sometimes those are called REUs. And lastly, scholar is when the student is ready to disseminate their research. So at this point, the student is thinking about presenting or publishing. If they're not able to present or publish, maybe their research is part of a larger project, they could serve as a mentor and really help their peers think about what undergraduate means and how it's valuable, and ways that they can help them be involved. So just taking another look at the model, this now is the student view. So same program, just different view. And what you can see here is that it's still the three stages: explore, engage, scholar, but every student's path is a little bit different. So we have a not straight dotted line to show you that that journey is different. And then we have more than one line from engage to scholar to show that there are many different ways that a student can be a scholar in their field, and we wanted to acknowledge that. In this view, the gray circle all around everything was meant to signify reflection, because we recognize that a reflection is an important part of the student's journey. We wanted to make sure that it was very obvious that reflection is taking place throughout the program, not just at the end to think about that culminating experience about what they did. So our second research question is, can we improve student reach and develop a holistic view of student undergraduate research at an R1 institution and the associated support needed? So what we did here is started to first think about what can we take advantage of in terms of what do we have already available on campus. Number one, we knew that students were engaged in mentored research in every discipline across campus. So that was, something that was already taking place. We knew that undergraduate research training courses for students in any discipline already existed. There were honors courses, non-honors courses, and of course the Advanced Research Skills Series from the library. The Office of Undergraduate Research also existed. It's a university level service unit that offered key research support and services as well. And they have things like ambassadors, regular symposia, and summer programming that were involved within the libraries. Lastly, we had a platform already on campus. Canvas was our learning management system. So we knew all of these things together were something that our plan would have to include. And so our next thought was, how do we actually incentivize students to do these things? Because there are going to be students that will do them for the sake of learning, but we really want to reach a lot of students. So we need to have good incentives to do that. So there were a variety of ways that we engaged participation. Probably our most successful was the ordering of graduation chords. So students earn a graduation chord by completing our UREP program. And we talk about this all the time, but the first time we launched this program, the director of the Office of Undergraduate Research got an email from a student that said, "Rumor on the drill field is that there are graduation chords." And we just remained delighted that we like did so well that we were a rumor. We're like, that's how you know you've really nailed it. This past spring, we integrated digital badging. Digital badging has been great because it allows us to reward students even if they don't do the entire program. So if students do a couple of our workshops, they get a couple micro badges. It shows us that hey, you've done this thing. We want to recognize that. But also maybe every student doesn't need every workshop, and we want to also celebrate the fact that the student knows what they need and maybe what they don't. So we want to talk briefly about the results from our research with this grant. The first one we're going to look at is Urep College by enrollment. So in terms of enrollment, we have students enrolled from all of Virginia Tech's major colleges, which is excellent. And this enrollment data tells us that the majority of students are from STEM fields, which is not surprising to us, but it also shows us that lowest enrollment is from architecture and urban studies and business. So knowing this information can allow us to consider if there are programmatic adjustments that we need to make. Maybe we need to do more outreach with those areas. Maybe, again, they're just not program offerings that they found that resonated with them. So we really need to think about that a bit more. The next one is Urep Chords by college. As we move towards completion rates for the program, the non-STEM majors decrease drastically. This visualization shows us that students in colleges of science and engineering are most likely to complete the program. So again, these results really tell us things that we need to consider when moving forward. And then looking at graduation chords by major. So when we take a closer look at those who have received graduation chords in terms of major, it becomes really clear that students majoring in life sciences earn the most chords. From this visualization in the previous one, we know that we need to make an effort to engage students in other domains. This engagement will hopefully be in form of outreach and participation, but also in gathering student feedback from those other domains in order to help us improve and to grow. And this last visualization shows us student participation over time. What we can see here is that the enrollment remains consistent over time and that students are progressing through this program who are not set to graduate until 2022, which means freshmen and sophomores are enrolling in this program, so they must have some level of exposure to undergraduate research and or to library programming and recognize, hopefully in some way, its value because they are enrolled and staying enrolled. Some of the lessons we learned from this work is that through the survey, the students strongly indicated high impact they felt with research on hand. So doing that research experience, they felt that high impact right away. They felt overall college experience improved and it helped inform their post-graduation plans. But they did not believe that UREP as necessarily contributing to those factors, which seems disappointing, but it's not. Instead, they recognize UREP as being a way for students to be celebrated for their work and time investment in research, to help students plan and eventually organize and document research related to experiences, and reflect on their experience, which they otherwise were not required to do. And so I found this extremely exciting because those were our actual 3 goals that we set up when we developed the program. So it tells us from the survey that our programmatic goals resonated with the students, even if it wasn't, the highest impact part of the work that research experience was. That's okay. We would anticipate that. So we felt like it was an absolute win. And lastly, I just wanted to share a student voice with you. Our overall response to the program has been extremely positive. Students are excited about the program and about outcomes. This student shown here was one of our inaugural winners of the Undergraduate Research Excellence Award this past year. Based on her completion of UREP and her strong presentation of her research project at the annual Spring Symposium. You can see the graduation chord in this photo. That is the Undergraduate Research Excellence graduation chord that was funded by this grant. She said, quote, "Not many students get to have a unique experience surrounded by supportive people and administration. I'm appreciative for all that this program has done for me, and I can't wait to take all of these skills to my next life experience," end quote. So thanks so much, and I will hand this off to our next presenter, but you're welcome to send me an email if you don't have a chance to ask questions today.
Right. ahead and share my screen, and we'll get. Helps if I'm at the beginning of. One second. Try again. There we go. My name is Amanda Ziegler, and I am the Director of Library Services at North Central University. And I wanted to take a minute and thank both the committee and the subcommittee for the opportunity to present about the research and also for the grant, because it has been a very interesting experience and hopefully will be helpful not only to my team at North Central as we continue to refine our services, but also to the rest of the library community. When the opportunity came up to apply for the Value of Academic Libraries grant, it really lined up with some of the institutional research that we were already doing at North Central. I think like all institutions of higher education these days, we are very focused on being data-driven and looking at what are the results and impacts that our services have. Our library was going through a time period where we were re-envisioning a lot of our services. So this opportunity was a really great time to take a look at how do we quantify the impact that we're having on our students. Another reason that I wanted to pursue this grant was that at the time, looking at the old ACRL OCLC literature analysis dashboard, there were a lot of resources in there. There were not a lot about online education. Remember, this was a pre-COVID world. And there were also very little about online graduate students, despite the fact that, in 2018, almost 37% of graduate students were completing coursework online. And that, there was a lot of information out there about how do you quantify library impact, but a lot of it focused on in-person services. And if it did look at graduate students, it was tangentially, and a lot of the research that did have information about online students was focused on synchronous interactions rather than asynchronous interactions. So I want to tell you a couple different things about North Central just to contextualize the research that we've been doing. We are a 100% online university. My team has operated a remote library for over 15 years now. We're scattered across the country, and so we were working 100% online in the pre-COVID environment as well, as were all of our students. We serve historically underrepresented students. Many of our students are older. The majority of our students are female. Many of our students are both employed and also have caregiving responsibilities. They often come to us after a long break from higher education, whether they're coming back to complete a master's or doctoral program. And we also have a significant population who are completing what we call the dissertation completion pathway, which are folks who are all but dissertation at another institution who we work with to, transfer the credits from their coursework and then move them through the dissertation process so that they can complete their dissertation. That leads to a very structured dissertation process. And so you can see here, our students progress through dissertation courses starting with the DIS 9901, and this is going to become relevant later, so promise there won't be a pop quiz though. As they move through these courses, a student might go through 9901A and then to 9902A without doing the B, C, and D courses. Those are meant to give extra time as they're working on those different chapters. So essentially they'll stay in the courses that are in the bubbles above each chapter until those chapters are completed. So that also allows us to look at not only what impact are we having on our students, but I can very clearly quantify, are they moving through this process? How are they doing as they're moving through this process? So keeping that in mind, our research question was really to look at if there was an impact of early career interventions from our students. And keep in mind that, as I mentioned before, some of our students come to us all but dissertation. And so I'm also looking at what's the impact of an intervention with those students early in their dissertation phase and not just in that coursework phase. We used Aston's input environmental output model and utilized match samples to evaluate longitudinal impact. Some of the things that we used as input factors: time since previous degree, program information, race, ethnicity, gender, age, household size, and veteran status, military affiliation. So all of those things, if we were looking at students who had utilized library services, then we found as close of a match as we could on those inputs to see, did we then have a significant impact? So we tried to control for these input factors as much as we could. The environmental factors that we're looking at, and we're still doing some analysis at this point, is completion and scoring on embedded asynchronous information literacy tutorials, synchronous engagement with the students, appointments, workshops, research consultations, reference transactions, and resource usage. And the things that we looked at is student vesting in fourth course, the GPA, the time to graduation, and those dissertation courses that I showed you earlier. How are students performing in those courses? As part of this, we have added a lot of services. So library orientations, research smart consultations for early coursework students as opposed to our dissertation phase students. Lots of new workshops. We've also been working on getting asynchronous tutorials embedded in 2 of our schools. And we added a law school during this time. So it's been interesting trying to parse the law students out of some of the doctoral data that we've been gathering. This just kind of breaks down what we've been looking at as far as asynchronous versus synchronous interactions with our students. I will mention these, the education tutorials and the business tutorials. That has been one of the most difficult parts of this research project, just because we had to develop the tutorials. We already had faculty buy-in at the time of the grant and kind of instructional design buy-in and all of that. But between regular academia and COVID, we just have not had them implemented in the courses long enough to get really good longitudinal data yet. So that is the big sad face, I would say, from my perspective, in the work that we've been able to accomplish. So just some key steps that we went through was, doing curriculum mapping, identifying where we wanted to embed these tutorials because they are embedded directly into our learning management system. So that's been a big piece of this. So results wise, we had the initial analysis, and this was data that we had moving into the project, was that students in the dissertation phase of their program who participated in a research consultation, which is a one-to-one meeting with a librarian via Zoom, were significantly more likely to meet expectations and make timely completion than those in a match sample who did not participate, 32.5% versus 0.05%. So I mean, it was a huge difference. So as we've completed further analysis, what we have found that I'm really very excited about is that the GPA in dissertation sequence courses was significantly higher for students who interact with the library, even though the students, and we didn't, if you remember from the input slide, we didn't control for GPA in our match samples, but what we found when we did the analysis was that the GPAs tended to be very similar between our control group of students and our library users in their content courses. But then once they have those research consults and they're participating in the dissertation sequence, the students who are interacting with the library do have a significantly higher GPA in their dissertation sequence courses, which we're very excited about. One thing that I was honestly surprised, given how big that percentage was in our initial findings, is that a year later, because we've had an extra year to look at data, thanks to COVID, I guess I can say, is that students who are still working to complete their dissertations were no more or less on track. Their grades were still better, but they had sort of evened out as far as progression. The other thing that we saw was that in a match sample analysis of students who are using synchronous and asynchronous reference services, they were more likely to have a high number of easy proxy logins than the students in the same program who did not. And initially, we are seeing some GPA differential there, but we have not been able to determine if that is significant. So I would like to think that the fact that they're logging into the library more often means that they are going to have higher grades, but that's the part that we're continuing to work on, looking at the numbers there. We also saw a significant increase, and this was not something that we originally intended to analyze, but we did see a significant increase in the aggregate student performance on our institutional learning outcome related to information literacy since we started adding in these new interventions as part of this grant work. So that is definitely a next step to look more closely at the individual level to better assess, exactly which interventions were having more impact. And that's it.
I think that's my cue to get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Ted Chodok. I'm a instructional and a reference librarian at the College of Southern Nevada, and my project is entitled Sense of Belonging in Academic Libraries. The project, the grant helped me out quite a bit, but also I had a sabbatical leave in the fall of 2019 from the College of Southern Nevada, and this research is part of my dissertation research at UNLV in the higher education program. So it's almost been 2 years total, which is crazy. So, but first thing after getting the grant was to complete the dissertation defense, the proposal defense, that is, and then the IRB approval, which ended up taking more than 4 months. And I got for the university site just 2 weeks before we shut down for COVID-19. And this research involves students being in the library, so that delayed the core part of it for 5 months. I did a lot of other stuff in the meantime, but it took until the fall of 2020 to be able to do observations, and then finally 28 student interviews, 11 at one site, 17 at the other. Those are all done through Zoom. And the students took pictures in the libraries I'm not going to get into the pictures so much in this presentation, but a total of 110 pictures for reflexive photographs are part of photo elicitation interviews. And then this spring, I've been, first of all, completing the transcription. The grant paid for transcription, but not all of it in the end. And also for incentives for students that were very helpful for the whole project. So even though the analysis is ongoing, I'm going to share some of the findings, the emerging findings. The sites are a community college and a university. They're both large schools, and the university is an R1 university. Both institutions are urban, highly diverse, minority serving institutions, Hispanic serving institutions, and ANAPISIs, which stands for Asian American, Native American, and Pacific Islander serving institutions. And those terms are federal designations based on enrollment. The demographics of the students follow the demographics of the student population overall pretty closely, with the largest group being Latinx, and then the other percentages that are as follows. There are some differences between, this is the combined, but the community college had more, higher percentage of African American or Black students, while the university was a little bit higher on the Asian or Asian American students. These are the overall numbers. And with the age range, the university was almost all traditional age, 18 to 24, while the community college, that was still most of the students, but there was a larger number of students who were non-traditional in their age. Most of the students, or nearly 3/4, are first generation. About a quarter of the women who participated have one or more children, and about 3/4 of the students were women. The research questions are very open-ended. They basically are, how are the students experiencing the libraries physically? How are they experiencing them socially, and comparing the two institutions? Of course, I had in mind a question of belonging, but and that informed the interviews and the protocols. So I'm going to just go through now some of the emerging findings using the students' words, and in how the differences between the community college and the university for these. So one is that a lot of these students, they spend a lot of time in the library, and this is in the community college, just about, they have their spots. They go to different places throughout the day. They know which places are good for sound, for comfort, for view, whatever it is. I really like this quote from, these are all pseudonyms, by the way, Kibra, who shows how all these spots are connected in this organic whole for him. So let's say when I want to use a computer, I need computers. When I want to use the study room, I need study rooms. When I want to be a relaxed time, I need to have those relaxation spots. So every one of them is connecting one another. So this organic whole. Another physical theme is you don't want to be too loud in the library. Now, this is kind of obvious. We know that libraries are associated with quiet, but as I've been really reflecting on this, I see that from a student's perspective, at least from the students I interviewed, the behavioral constraint related to sound, even though there are many places that are social learning spaces in the libraries as opposed to completely quiet spaces, but even that behavioral constraint defines their ability, enables them to participate in the way they want to participate in their studying. And so it's very important for them in terms of where they choose to study about the sound levels and those and what behaviors and the norms of the library. So you can see this in the first quote from Jenny. It's a library. Generally, you don't want to be too loud in the library. You've got to be cognizant of other people. And about the computer lab, which is the main other place they might go, people are just loud in general and they don't care. So in a library, you could look at someone and say, look, could you quiet down? And the students self-police that way. But in the computer lab, they're not going to respond. This is from the university. And some of these really bleed together between whether they're physical or social, but feeling at home for many of these students, and especially these first two who are first generation students, had to do with background noise. Home environment has noise, whether it's children or TV or street noise, and that allowed them to feel more comfortable and at home. And the third student, it was the closeness and everyone working together. Of course, this is not, even though the interview happened during COVID times, no one's been this close lately in the library, but the idea that they're in this small space together really, but they're all doing their own thing, that associated with home for that student. And this is connected in a way, but just the idea of being comfortable. The comfortable has to do with the sound levels, but for this one student, Frank, it wasn't just that it was with his friends and all of that, but also it has to do with the tutorial center being there and knowing that everything is going to be okay. There's someone's going to help you if you need help. And another student, with the sound is not the main thing. It's that seeing all these people working together and helping each other in the social learning environment is something that feels comfortable and makes it a place that she can study. The community college, now this applies to the university as well, but it was a much more pronounced theme for the community college, is that a lot of students go there alone. They're not there to interact. They're not there for socializing, but they're motivated by seeing other students working. And that can, as the third quote, give them energy to study. And the library is this place, this is a workplace. This is a place that's serious for a lot of students. They go there to work. They know they have a limited amount of time. Most of the students at the community college are part-time. Many of them have full-time jobs. Many of them have children. So when they go there, this is a place to work, and they draw energy from seeing other students accomplishing their goals. It's also important because students can, if they're not so familiar with higher education and academic libraries, are modeling themselves on seeing students work in this environment, which helps them be successful too. At the community college especially, feeling cared about was associated with the librarians. This has a lot to do with how these institutions are set up, where the librarians are, the emphasis on librarians as opposed to peers, student peers helping. So a lot of decisions come into this, but it was a theme. It is a theme that students associate the being cared about with the librarians at the community college, about these librarians going above and beyond what might be expected as the students see it. For the university, it's more about the peer work, and this is about really what I would call a discipline-based community of practice model. Students are coming together in their discipline, in their program, in the library as a center, building community there. And Sierra, the student in the middle quote, really is talking about how this is modeling for her the future. This is projecting into the future of collaborating in the health industry. In other students, the third quote, this is sort of a central element of her sense of community in the university. This is about peer groups coming together, their identity base, whether it's from the students coming from their home environment, like the first quote, the student spends time with other students who are Pacific Islanders. The third quote is from a student who went to a local high school and spending time with students who went to the same local high school. And it can also just be friends, but it's working together with friends is a little bit different than that discipline base, but also is another kind of community of practice, which I'd call it a identity group community of practice. Now, when I came into this, I was thinking of sense of belonging in a psychological side, and this quote from Strayhorn is that sense of belonging is a cognitive evaluation. These are my people, basically. I don't think that fully explains it anymore. Because I think that as I've been doing this research, I'm much more focused on a sociocultural analysis. And from that analysis, belonging has to do with engagement, imagination, and alignment. And so those examples of seeing other students working and aligning behavior with it those examples from the more of a community practice of imagining the future and engaging in behaviors together in terms of studying behaviors really makes a lot of sense to me in terms of the data. Legitimate peripheral participation, which is kind of the backbone of the community practice idea, is just the idea that everyone's a legitimate participant. Everyone's in the periphery. It's not that someone else is in the center, and everyone's participating in figuring in the library in various ways. So I see the academic library as having nested communities of practice and a macro community of practice that envelops all of those communities. And then to think about how this connects to student success. And it's just kind of looking at Tinto's model, which has social integration along with academic integration. And traditionally, or and as it's developed, it's already been around for a long time. The idea was that students would have to be in clubs, they'd be involved socially in a number of ways, and it was really a residential model. And a lot of people have applied it to commuter schools. These are both primarily commuter schools, and the community college is fully commuter school. And so then the question is, where does that social integration happening? And as I'm seeing the importance of socializing in the library, in the both in a way of just observing other students, but also in these communities of practice, in group study rooms, that this social integration and academic integration is happening in the library. It's a central place for it. And the decision to become a regular library user and to be aligned and engaging in the behaviors in the library are part of this integration. And this, as students feel that they belong in that environment and the academic community, may inform decisions to persist, which ties this together with student academic success. And that's it for my presentation. So I will.
Thank you so much, Ted. And thank you all three for your fabulous presentations. Let's see. So now we have time for some Q&A and some further conversation. Before we get started, I want to just kind of share these few ground rules for discussion. And our hope is that we can have a productive conversation today and that you will join us in being committed to learning from each other and with each other. And we hope that any differences in opinions or perspectives will increase our learning rather than hinder. And we will trust that we are all doing our best. And remember to challenge individuals or challenge ideas and not individuals. So with that, I would love to turn it over to all participants and attendees for some open Q&A. And we have Lisa from our Value of Academic Libraries Library Impact Grant Subcommittee, who's going to help facilitate the Q&A.
Yeah, and Becky, so far, I don't see any questions in the chat. So
I have a couple. I'll go ahead and put them in the chat so that everybody can see the question. So as for the first presenter group, Amanda Mcdonald and Ann Brown, what does the Urep experience look like for students? Like what does participation look like, I guess?
Yes, sure. So usually what it looks like is when I kind of went through thinking about taking advantage of what we had on campus, Urep actually lives in our Canvas, our learning management system on campus. And so what we do is we work with the Office of Undergraduate Research and we attend kind of different events to do outreach. And then when a student actually enrolls in Urep is really just a Canvas shell that is organized in 5 categories that fit into that Explore, Engage, Scholar model. So students can attend training, they can conduct research, take classes, do reflections, and we basically have it categorized into those 5 modules, and then students submit assignments showing that the work that they've done, and then we verify those experiences, and then they get a digital badge once they've finished each section, and then they get just little points. The point system doesn't mean anything other than for us and the Office of Undergraduate Research to determine when they've finished a category. So essentially each category has points, and it just helps students. The badging, I think, makes it even easier because our digital badging is in Canvas, and so the students can see the pathway. They can see automatically what they've done, what they need to do. And so for the student, I think the Canvas course just helps the student consider, what haven't I done yet? What experiences do I still need? You know, what is the next part of my journey until I get this graduation cord? And so the real goal for us is to just kind of celebrate those little milestones. And for students, I think it's just giving them a place to realize that, like, there are things I can do across 4 years, not just like in that last bit, you know, before I graduate.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to think more about that here at my university, UNC Charlotte.
Okay, looks like there's another question for Amanda and Anne. It says, roughly how much do the graduation rope cords cost per student in case we wanted to implement a similar incentive for a similar program on our campus?
I actually have that answer for you.
Excellent.
Because I was just ordering, I was spending my final funds. So the graduation cord we selected has 3 different colors. And sadly, when we originally made the selection, the 3 different colors we selected were one of their standard cords, but now it's a specialty cord to get those 3 colors. So this time it was more expensive. For the 3 colors that we got this time, I got 35 cords and it was $299. The first time we got 125 cords for $675. So they're now a little bit more expensive. But then other things like digital badging, if your university already has that technology, like those types of awards are free. But I will say that, like, I had no idea how motivated the graduation cord would be. And at Virginia Tech, it is like this coveted thing. Like, students want to get as many as they can. So it has worked really well, but it is an investment.
Thank you, Amanda. I think that the cords are a great idea. I think it's great that students, you know, upon graduation, receive this something tangible and also something that they can take home and maybe display on their wall or whatever. So I think that's a great idea. There's another question for Amanda. Can you tell us a bit more about the Research Smart Service program?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, because the initial findings on our research consultations were so encouraging with that 32% versus 0.05%, we really wanted to find a way to bring that one-to-one experience earlier in the program, because the research consultations are often students who've already completed their coursework. They're coming to us during their dissertation phase, sometimes as they're working on their proposal, so just before the dissertation phase, but for the most part during that dissertation phase for those one-on-one interactions. And so what we decided to do was to launch a new service that was specifically targeted at early content courses and looking at, you know, what are the options that what would kind of bring students in. So the program is called Research Smart Getting Started, and it is a one-to-one session where the students come in, they meet with the librarian via Zoom, and it's really an opportunity for them to learn how to conduct research. We tell them, you know, we want to help you find relevant resources. How can you build your own knowledge within their field of study? We try to really keep, because it's a one-on-one service, it's very personalized. We talk about, you know, what are the tools that you need to complete your assignments in your core courses? How do you establish a research routine? Because again, so many of our students are going on to doctoral work. So we want to kind of build those habits early in their content courses so that when it gets to the dissertation phase, they're not struggling to, you know, oh, it would have been really great if I had been getting, new research alerts about this topic for the past 2 years while I was doing my coursework. So we want to help them kind of get those things set up. And it has been really successful. Students really like the program. We have seen more adoption in certain schools, and it tends to be the schools where our students, partially because of outreach, but also I think because of sort of the discipline specificity of some of the databases. So our School of Business, business students have some very specific research needs. School of Health Sciences, same story for those folks. So they are really taking advantage of that program at this point. So.
Great, thanks, Amanda. The next question is for Ted. Were you able to see any patterns of sense of belonging by race, ethnicity, and if I may add, also across different age groups? You're muted.
Okay, sorry about that.
There you go.
I'm muted now. It is a little bit tricky because these schools are minority serving institutions, and most of the students are not white who participated. So some of this is difficult to say, but what I'd say overall is that for some students, and I found this especially for international students or students who have a strong identity group, and this was true of Pacific Islanders, Chinese students, and a group of Ethiopian and East African students, that the library became a place that is that could be called a counter space. It could be called a safe space. That it was a space that they not only gathered for they saw it primarily as academic, but also had a social component. So the group study rooms were a safe place to speak their language, and literally their language, but also culturally. But then this, as I kind of alluded to, there's a pattern with the emphasis on social learning and students who come from more maybe less traditional backgrounds in terms of library use. So the idea that the social learning is important to them. I don't think it's really easy to divide that by race and ethnicity, though, because if you look at the community college, you have a lot of students who work full-time. They have children at home often. And this is, there are other findings, other studies, I don't have the names in front of me, that kind of bore this out too. Carols can be very important. The idea of having this wall around you, the idea of having a quiet space can be very important. So on the one hand, you have students who want that social learning. Those are students who maybe more residential focused, maybe more full-time students. Then you have those students who are part-time students who need that space for that concentrated focus. So it really depends, not just on race and ethnicity, but depends on whether they're full-time or part-time. It's other socioeconomic factors about whether they fit into those different groups. I'll be continuing to analyze that, though, to see if those patterns become more clear. But as it is, I don't see it as completely clean cut, except that I think there's some interesting things about safe spaces and counter spaces that may be coming, through the research.
And then there's another question for you. Based on your findings, do you have recommendations for how libraries can help facilitate the development of communities of practice and/or a sense of belonging?
And looking at this, I realize I'm drawing on some other findings of other studies. I think May and Swaby, if I'm saying that right, was one that comes to mind. The idea that students think of the library as having to, first of all, provide the quiet space. Then if they have the quiet space, you can also have the social learning spaces. The reason I mention that is that for community colleges especially, it can be hard to do all the things that students want them to do if the space is limited. And so you have to start with what you actually have available. But if you have the ability to do it, I think both of these institutions have done a good job. Sometimes with group study rooms, that's probably the easiest way to do this. You have to have these different environments so students can feel comfortable. I found, looking at it in more detail, that you need, for students to be able to observe other students, that's pretty obvious. A reading room can do that. But sometimes it's also helpful to be able to facilitate students talking to each other. At the university, it was at the circulation desk where students felt comfortable talking to other students and asking them how to do things. At the community college, it was talking to the librarian, and whether it's better as a peer or as a peer-based or based on having a librarian do it, I'm really not sure what's better for students overall. But I think the important thing is that students need to be able to know that they can get help and talk to someone. And they need to be able to have places where they feel comfortable interacting with other students if they don't know them. And so how do libraries do this? I think a lot of the new furniture, like furniture that's sort of comfortable seating, these USB, kind of a laptop desk type models, help to facilitate students talking to each other. They help facilitating having multiple groups interact. I think that's useful. And I think a lot of the traditional things also just help. Windows, comfortable seating. So, but in general, universities can feel like very big bureaucracies for a lot of students. They can feel very, they may not necessarily feel like they can reach out to, especially new students may not feel like they can reach out to professors. They may feel like that's hard for them to do. One of the students at the university said, I knew that people at the circulation desk would answer my question. I knew that was part of their job. I knew I could ask them whatever I wanted because they're supposed to do that. And having that environment where students feel like they can ask makes a difference.
And one more, Ted, do you feel that students were more appreciative of the space or aware of its benefits after not having access during COVID closures?
Yeah, a lot of the students were. And one factor that is in the community college, but not in the university, is that a lot of the students depended on the computers, the desktop computers. Now, the community college had a program for those students to get laptops. Even though the community college was shut down, they had a program for those students to get laptops. But for a lot of those students, using the Acrls and using the desktop computers was how they were able to do their work. And so they're very appreciative of that. Appreciative of the space too, because for students, and several of the students, especially the community college, who have fairly challenging home environments in terms of being able to concentrate. And they really missed having the library as a space where they could focus on their work.
Okay, thanks, Ted. Now a question for Amanda Mcdonald and Ann Brown. What time commitment and or resources should libraries anticipate in developing and maintaining a program like Urep?
The hardest part, I think, is the startup of it. So the initial time investment in Canvas, setting up your course in Canvas, getting those modules set up, figuring out what you can count, what exists on campus. Like you have to do a lot of research to think about, like for us, it's all about undergraduate research. So we built in all the library stuff. We knew that stuff pretty quickly, but thinking about other workshops on campus, things like that. So making sure that it includes, if you want it to, all the places students would engage in whatever it is that you're doing, if you're doing research, what that looks like. So that initial setup took us a long time. Maintaining it is not hard. Like we have never changed. We have like one link to a form and I can just see the date when students fill it out. And we just enroll students in classes. I have a cohort for every graduating semester. So that's how I ended up dividing it up. So I have spring, summer, fall. And so whenever students are graduating, it could get harder. It's going to get more expensive too, because we have hundreds of students in it now. I mean, probably, I don't know. I just rough guessing. I should go back and look at it, but probably close to 1,000. So, it'll be interesting if y'all want Chords. We'll have to get some more. But yeah, so I think I also have the Office of Undergraduate Research helping me. So there is an office assistant who now does, I set up all the forms and initially I was the one enrolling everyone. And now her office does enrolling and then I evaluate library work. and then the director evaluates that work. So it's just looking at those things, assigning badges, things like that, doing the scoring, but it's not after, you can copy it after each one of those. So it's not long-term investment, but that initial setup, you should plan to put in a lot of hours. Ongoing, I would say maybe 10 a semester.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We are out of time, actually a little bit over time. I want to express my sincerest thanks for our panelists and also our attendees for joining us. Panelists, please share your slides with me and I'll package them all up and send them to Elois, who will disseminate them accordingly to all registrants. And like I said, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for sharing. It's a really great day. So
Thank you, everyone. Enjoyed
thank you.
listening to all your presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.